Welcome back to Left Anchor. I'm Alexei the Greek.
And I'm Ryan Cooper. We're welcoming back to the podcast Professor Harvey J. Kaye, who is Professor Emeritus of Democracy and Justice at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay, a co-founder of the Wisconsin Labor History Society, and a member of the Wisconsin Federation of Teachers.
So you guys looking forward to this coming weekend?
Oh, go Birds. Yeah. I keep forgetting what day, year, century I'm in. Yeah. No, that's right. That's exciting. That is a small...
I almost feel guilty at how much attention I've given football these last several weeks. Okay. So
it's a nice distraction.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about the first few days of the Trump administration. Too Trump, too furious, and his inauguration speech and the flurry of executive orders that he has released since taking power. Once again, they're coming. I mean, they are literally coming fast and furious. I don't think we can even get to all of them, but I think, we can touch on a few. But we can, I think, start with the inauguration speech. I did not watch it live at the time. I was taking care of my kid, and frankly, I didn't want to, but I watched it later and I read the transcript. But Harvey, you had some sort of initial thoughts on the thing as a whole. So maybe we could start with that. What did you think of it as, a piece of presidential oratory?
Well, I mean, obviously, for those of us who have seen it, now that I assume you've seen it since that day, it is characteristically egomaniacal on Trump's part, the things truly egomaniacal. And on top of that, it probably, at least in my lifetime, is the most reactionary presidential inauguration address ever. I mean, in the course of my lifetime. And I keep in mind, I wouldn't have heard them when I was a little kid, but I've looked back at those things and there's no question this was unbelievably reactionary. And the other thing is that, it's quite clear if you look back at inaugural addresses that presidents newly inaugurated always find a way to reference the Almighty, God, whatever. But I mean, I was blown away when he actually said, "God saved me." I know he could say that out there, outside of, the Capitol building, but that he said it in his address, and then I knew that we were in for it in this speech. And in fact, we were in for it in this speech. And I ended up making innumerable notes when I went back to reread it, and most of which I can't even remember. But some of them have already come to pass, which he made as promises, such as when we'll get to it, the rounding up of immigrants and refugees, right? The ending by way of executive order, birthright citizenship. These kinds of things in an inaugural address, to my mind, are unprecedented, really unprecedented. And then I was also thinking along the way, this is not coherent what I'll be saying right now. It's because it's in some ways I haven't even been able to articulate it fully myself. But the speech that he gave in 2017, the American Carnage speech, I went back to look at that, and when I reread it, I have to say that in light of what he said this time, that one seemed pretty mild, frankly.
Interesting. Really?
Okay. It just, I mean, I could find things that were shocking then, but I just remember him being a terrible speech maker. Okay. And I also remember him saying in that original speech, there were words, and I don't know who stuck them in, Stephen Miller, I have no idea, which were trying to echo of all presidents, FDR. He referred to the forgotten men and women or forgotten men. I mean, that kind of thing. But it wasn't nearly the horror show that this speech was. Okay. But at the same time, just to have it all out there, we can take all these things up. At the same time, there were moments which were absolutely hilarious. I mean, in the midst of the tragedies or the fires in Los Angeles, he had the audacity to kiss the asses, okay, of the billionaires seated nearby him as they were seated in the rotunda. and to ask us all to feel terribly sorry because the billionaires were included amongst those who lost their homes. He actually referred to these billionaires, the ones who might well have lost their homes, as homeless.
Yeah.
Homeless.
I even think he was maybe mocking them a little bit. He's so funny. He just says, yeah, they no longer have homes. Very interesting.
Yeah. That's a class.
Well, he was mocking a lot of people if that was the case. Cause
yeah.
Okay. And there were another, and then of course his ambition to rename the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, his determination to reclaim the Panama Canal. I mean, those are moments which were hysterical in themselves, but the most hysterical was the homeless billionaires. Okay. And if anyone listening to this actually feels sorry for the homeless billionaires, keep in mind, they all own more than one home, right? And the homes they own are probably so big, okay, that they really didn't know what to do with them to begin with if they were halfway intelligent. Okay, so those are the kind of things that it struck me just bam. And I'm not even, as you guys speak, I'm sure I'll remember others.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah, he said, quote, or the fires are, quote, raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer. That's interesting. Yeah. That's such that's a classic
that's interesting,
Trump.
He says.
I always told my students that if somebody says interesting in an essay, I'm going to just mark it up as much red as I can, okay? Because that says nothing. But in this instance, it was hysterical.
It's hilarious. I think it's because he has zero empathy, and I don't know that he planned to say that, but I think he's just amused. He's just kind of amused. Like even the wealthy, their homes are destroyed.
Yeah, it's such a classic Trump ad lib. I think I'd be very surprised if that was in the text. Yeah, in the original text?
Yeah,
in what he was reading off the prompter.
I think I got a hold of what was created for the media, and then I went back, and they seem to be. And the difference is the one that I picked up most recently had the words applause in it. That which was the media adding that kind of thing. So I'm not sure it wasn't in there. I mean, maybe it wasn't, but let's put it this way: he couldn't resist saying it. There's so many things that he just can't resist saying.
Yeah, he is terrible at delivering like a prepared speech. It's just very low energy. I think his eyes are so bad. He can barely see the teleprompter. We've seen him before because he's too vain to wear glasses. So when they give him his briefing materials, everything's printed out in 72-point font. It's just like headlines of a book.
Well, that's funny to say that.
Sedate. Yeah. He was sedate, wasn't he? He was very low energy.
That's what I was going to say. I thought to myself, what's he taking so that he doesn't come across as a raving lunatic? I mean, it just was too, low key. You're absolutely.
Affect.
He usually sounds like that, in that ballpark at least. When he's delivering a prepared speech, he just what he likes is to just sort of ramble off the cuff for 3 hours about just snippets of nonsense, bopping around to actresses from the 1940s and stuff. And it just it's totally disjointed, but he's much more energetic and engaged rather than just sort of plodding through the remarks. And yeah, in that section though, I think worth noting, the sheer gall of what he's accusing the Biden administration. He says, quote, we now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. And so first of all, you think, all right, what big disasters did Trump have to deal with? COVID, that was one of them. And he screwed that up about as badly as you could screw it up. Remember the whole, you should inject yourself with bleach or shine UV.
Thought I had when you just said that, you bet.
And that wasn't the worst part. I think the worst thing he did was right at the beginning when he was just denied that it was happening, and just didn't want any testing and didn't want, it's just, if you sweep it under the rug, and it's not on the television, then that means it's not a real thing. And what that allowed it to do was to fester for, weeks before the control measures could go into effect. And that, I think, more or less directly caused the massive outbreak in New York City that killed, untold thousands of people. And then he goes on, again, quote, "Our country can no longer deliver basic services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina who have been treated so badly." And so this is a lie, about the Biden administration not, doing good disaster relief in North Carolina. That's just complete bullshit. And then he goes on to talk about Los Angeles. But what he doesn't say is that he and his party have both threatened, they're promising to attach conditions to any sort of disaster aid. It's so just galling again, that they would come out with just this level of egregious hypocrisy, just kind of just pissing in your face, and then telling you it's raining while they're doing it.
Right.
And I think that it's kind of a classic strategy, I think, of kind of far right and fascist movements to make these just sort of brass bald claims that are so outrageously dishonest and malicious that you almost don't know what to say. You're just kind of stunned that anyone would even say something like that. Shameless, but that's
the lies flowed. Okay. Like the price of energy.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there has been inflation. He then lied about the sources of inflation. Okay. The overspending and and then when he referred to the price of energy, but then he went on basically to say, so we're going to pump more. But the point is, we've been pumping more and more and more, I think, probably since Obama, decidedly under Biden. And we know the consequences of that. I go to the pump and I say to myself, I can't believe the price of gas isn't what I remember it back sometimes in the past, like in the 70s and other times.
Yeah. No, it's again, the complete inversion of reality. Not only, like, he makes a reference to filling up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve again, but core to Biden's whole approach is sort of like all of the above, except he actually did it this time. It was like like what Obama said, but Biden actually did. It was the massive oil and gas drilling and also massive investment in green energy technology. And it's just accusing. It's like under Obama and now Biden, the U.S. is the biggest producer of oil and gas in the world, bigger than Saudi Arabia, bigger than Russia. And it's like there isn't really that much more that we could pump. And, the fact that it's like people complain about the price of gas all the time. It's like, well, one nice thing about, for instance, owning an electric vehicle is you don't have to buy gas anymore. Like, that's almost my favorite part of having an EV now. It's you could just flip off the gas station every time you drive past it. But on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, one thing that Biden did was that when, gas prices were going up in 2022 is he did a big sale out of that thing and basically broke the back of the oil speculators by making a credible commitment to pump more oil out of that reserve until the price hits like the ceiling that he wanted. He didn't want it to go so high. And so all of the futures traders were like, well, we're going to lose money if we bet against the government. And it made it a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your classic sort of like implicit price control type situation when you have a big strategic reserve of some commodity. And then the other thing he did is that when the price went back down again, he filled the reserve back up and made like a $5 billion profit for the government, the biggest oil trade in history, probably. And I mean, that's not great from a climate perspective, but it's exactly the type of shit that Trump accuses him of not doing. And,
only Trump can make me want to defend Biden.
Meanwhile, Trump invents things that didn't happen. He says, I'm going to end the Green New Deal, as if the Green New Deal has happened.
I did a double take on. I have to tell you, I did a double take because I wanted to know. I know the administration and the Democrats have been really bad at messaging, but I wanted to know, did I miss something?
Yeah. Well, in his executive order, which we'll get to later, one thing he talks about is basically trying to unconstitutionally abrogate the Inflation Reduction Act, which is like maybe you could say like 25% of a Green New Deal type package, you're trying to do basically green industrial policy, a bunch of subsidies for electric vehicles, green energy, and green manufacturing. And, he's going to just stop the money flowing, to steal the power of the purse from Congress. It's the trial balloon for impoundment, as we'll discuss. But that gets to another thing he's talking about, later. Mentions, our great auto companies, they're going to have the ability to sell whatever kind of cars they want. Well, the whole industry, basically got on board with Biden's approach. They look at the trends around the world. They see the just galloping progress in EV tech. And they're like, well, this is going to be where it's at in the future at some point. And so we need to get on board with this, or we're going to be left behind. We're going to have this stranded technology that's not any good anymore. And
not to mention the investments, massive investments that made in that way. And I really have to interject, because I don't know if you will. Yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, time is definitely fleeting right now. The American Prospect, your magazine, not that you own it, but your magazine for which you are the managing editor, Ryan, had a phenomenal survey of the day one executive orders and the implications of them. Harold Meyerson sent, I subscribe, but in any case, Harold Meyerson was sending stuff around. And it is the case, if anyone wants to go into the details of the kinds of things I know Ryan will bring up, go to the American Prospect website. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I was planning on bringing that up, but there's a good chance I would have forgotten to do it. But yeah, as you were saying before, one of the pieces that I wrote in there was referencing some of my previous reporting about how all the auto companies, Ford, GM, Stellantis, Rivian, even Tesla, to some degree, though they're far ahead enough that Elon Musk thinks that cutting these subsidies will hurt everyone else more than him. Like, they've made tens, probably hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in new factories, new product lines. GM has this whole Ultium platform they spent like 5 years developing. And, like, making a car is a difficult business in this day and age. They have a ton of technology in there. And so these companies are only just now getting to the prospect of being able to, like, make a profit under the structure of how the government has set up the various subsidies for production and for purchasing an EV and all of that sort of thing. And so, some of them are further behind than others. Ford's not doing so good. GM's actually doing quite well, kind of remarkably. I wasn't expecting that. They're pretty close to profitability. But anyway, if Trump manages to cut the money off, either with an unconstitutional, just like overturning of how the budget works, or by repealing Inflation Reduction Act in Congress, it's just going to put a knife right in the back of the American auto industry and the American auto workers unions. They were planning on this. This was their long-term strategy for the next 100 years. We're going to end up here, probably by the 2030s, maybe the 2040s. That's the kind of cars we're going to make, because that's what the world is going to want. And we need to, like, get ahead of it, or China's going to eat our lunch. They're already ahead of us. They're making better EVs for cheaper. And Trump's just saying, no, we're going to cut you off at the knees before you manage to get to where your EVs are penciling out in a business sense. And it was close, but it it's just what you get for Trump.
Well, one thing to remember, I was saying this, I think, some time ago. I mean, his idea of capital is real estate.
Yeah.
And he has no imagination and no knowledge of industrialization. I mean, that's not part of, it's never been, he failed the first time around. He made those promises about the upper Midwest, and about workers, the jobs and so on. It didn't happen. In fact, one of the things that I should say, when I went back to that first speech, the promises took up a whole paragraph. Okay. Not just the jobs. It was going to build bridges. It was going to it sounded like it was going to be the PWA and the WPA and the CCC of FDR all rolled into one. Bam. We were going to have to use his own words, a golden age, right? It's as if he was going to pursue some kind of New Deal, green or otherwise. And he failed. And he never intended it, and he never knew how to do it. All he wanted to do was make money. Okay.
Yeah.
And because that's all he could imagine doing, because he probably didn't expect to win last time. And he did. And this time around, his idea of development is basically you cut in favor of Musk and the folks who are sitting up there. Look, I can't imagine that the guys who are sitting up there have any affection whatsoever, other than Musk, and I don't know what he thinks, have any affection for Donald Trump. But he's the one who can protect them in the case of Bezos against labor, possibly. I mean, each one of them has their agenda. And as they sat there, they were probably thinking to themselves, what the fuck am I doing here? And then they remembered what it's going to do for them.
Yeah. And in particular, another thing we've covered at the Prospect is that all these big companies, Meta, Amazon, Tesla, SpaceX, have been under investigation by federal law enforcement or regulatory agencies, right. Sometimes more than one. Tesla, I think it's 5 of them. And this is just the God's gift to these people, or that's what they're expecting,
yes,
I think.
Right. That's right.
That Trump will stop enforcing the law on oligarchs like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, and they'll keep getting their big federal contracts, and everything will go fine. And I think that plus, the fear of worker militancy that we saw a little bit of in Silicon Valley in these big tech companies, and it drove them to distraction. These guys saw workers being trying to assert some control over stuff like work from home, and wages and benefits, and how these companies are run, especially because working at Meta is a highly conscience, hurting enterprise. This is one of the most evil companies that's ever existed. And
by the way, which also throws in questions about DEI that maybe most people would not have not realized, but the number of South Asians who are working in many of these companies is pretty significant. And by most accounts, the caste system has also been imported into these companies, so that if you had originated from a lower caste family in India, you will not advance inside of that company. This came up in California, where Newsom, I believe, actually vetoed some bill that included a banning of the caste system, as a cultural practice. No, I mean, so it's not unlikely that also plays into there. Well, that'll solve another problem there. And by the way, sorry, that was also a segue for something else that I remembered. 2 things about it. First of all, you will note, and most people wouldn't even know what it refers to, the Alien Act of 1798. Now, most people think, what? They probably thought he must have gotten his years wrong. But the alien in the John Adams administration of the Federalists, who were the closest thing to the conservative and reactionary party available at the time, they enacted as a way of driving out pro-French revolutionary figures, the Alien Act. Okay. And I believe this is what he's thinking of in terms of this threat to the United States, which he's now sort of empowered himself to round up undocumented Mexican Americans and others. But the other thing that I want people to realize, and this, if this happens, I hope I haven't given him ideas. Okay. It's in the history books. It's not referred to as the Alien and Sedition Enemies Act. It's referred to as the Alien and Sedition Acts, because the Sedition Act, which, by the way, similar took place in the Wilson administration during World War I, the Sedition Act literally outlawed the capacity to criticize the administration and the government. And it was used. In fact, I believe it was even used against a congressman or 2 during those years. Basically, it was used against folks who had been followers of Thomas Paine's radical democratic ideas. And by the way, and again, I'd love to know who actually wrote the speech for him. You will note, I'm surely you both saw, he made reference to a revolution of common sense. People were sending me texts and saying, what do you think about that? I mean, that's a reference, of course, the whole revolutionary idea of America, which Thomas Paine was the godfather of, and also Common Sense was the pamphlet in which he laid out the idea of a democratic republic and independence from England. So, I mean, it had its references, not unlike when he used Forgotten Man back in 2017. But I bring it up because I heard Alien Act, and the next thing I thought of was Sedition Act. And this is an administration which people might think I'm being paranoid, is more than capable of coming up with some kind of package that would suppress dissent.
No, and Harvey, is that one of the reasons you thought it was the most reactionary presidential speech ever? Because there's a number of reasons I could see why you'd characterize it that way. Was it the executive orders that he promised or that he had already done at that point? Was it the symbolism or some of the kind of ways he divided the country into us and them? Or what elements did you think were most reactionary?
Okay, well, so we have to go to like 48 hours before the speech delivery. And if you go look in the media, New York Times, Washington Post, a lot of online places, everyone was saying Trump's advisors, his, promoters are saying this is going to be a speech about unity. Okay.
He has one line. He has one line where he says he's a peacemaker and a unifier. So
yes. That. Yeah. That was a good. And I, what always crosses my mind is that maybe the inaugural address for him would have been the time in which he didn't scare the shit out of people. Maybe, just maybe, he would fool people and then go do the executive orders. Okay. But that speech was divisive. I loved when he thanked Black and African-American communities and Mexican-American communities for turning out for him. Okay. I mean, they didn't turn out for him. Let's be clear about that. And much exaggerated the turnout period for him. But that's his own way of sort of sounding sweet. But most people are going to say bullshit if they are Black or Hispanic.
He even said he's going to fulfill MLK's dream.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Well, and in that vein, before I then explain, really answer your question, I loved when he said, was it right at the beginning? It was like, the shorthand, I'm going to paraphrase, I am the most persecuted president ever. Okay. In the past 8 years, well, the 4 in and the 4 out of years, I've faced more challenges and whatever than anyone. And I thought to myself, Abraham Lincoln? Wait a minute. This guy. And now, by the way, he knows nothing of history, but what little he knows, he couldn't care less if he's right or wrong. You all will recall his referring to Frederick Douglass doing good things. I don't even know if he realizes the story of the Civil War whatsoever. Okay. So, but the point is, that's why I keep thinking, is it Stephen Miller? I mean, we shouldn't underestimate the smarts of some of these people he has around them. He needs these people, really. But when he said that, and then, which led him then to say, saved by God. I mean, maybe it was the Lincoln connection that Miller had in mind. Well, what was the truly most reactionary was, it really was the executive order, the image of black or brown shirted ICE agents, whatever they're wearing these days, turning up and rounding up people. Okay. And I can tell you that as ugly as that is, in civil liberty terms, I have to say that back in 1931 into 32, it was before FDR became president, during the Hoover years, in the Southwest, and I don't know to what extent the Hoover administration endorsed it or not, there were roundups of Mexican American. Well, then they were known as just Mexicans. And they were then placed on trains going to go back over the border. Okay. And it wasn't really until FDR took the presidency that kind of thing would come to an end. And here's the point. They rounded up a hell of a lot of American citizens in doing that. And it's a nightmare to imagine, one, the definition that he's provided, and two, the reality that will ensue.
Right. And he used the term millions of people. Right.
Well, that was a good one. Yeah. I noticed that. Yeah. Right. Millions.
So lest anyone think this is a highly targeted, affair.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of his orders, is to just overturn the 14th Amendment, which says in plainest possible language that anyone born in this country is a citizen automatically. And they're just going to try to get rid of that, just pretend like it doesn't exist. And, you know, so instead it would replace them where you have to prove that, you know, I guess at least one of your parents is a citizen. I believe that's how it works, or maybe it's both. But anyway, that raises the question of, how do you prove that your parents are citizens? You go back and look at your birth certificate, you know, like I checked mine out actually, and it says, okay, I was born in Utah on this date. It doesn't say anything about the immigration status of my parents. And you know, so this just opens up a huge can of worms where, you know, you could just have a massive bureaucratic clusterfuck in terms of like, you know, getting people by accident, or, you know, you could just use it as a convenient excuse to deport anyone who you find politically unpalatable, someone who pisses off Elon Musk is like, prove you're a citizen, and they go and root through their, you know, file drawers or whatever and be like, I have a social security card somewhere, and they're like, oh, too late. Off you go into the camp. You're getting deported to, you know, I'm not even sure where I would go. Ireland, maybe, or you split me into like 14 parts, and I go to a bit of Germany, a bit to Wales, bits of Britain.
As long as you brought up Ireland, I have to tell you, when I was growing up into the 70s, I don't know the numbers, but in the New York City area, a lot of the men who were doing, you know, repair work on homes were Irish. And most of them came in on tourist visas and overstayed their legal welcome. And I keep thinking to myself, again, this is not meant to be funny at all. I keep imagining, I'm not imagining for a start, how racist this is, because you know that this is now going, what do they call that? What was it when they would stop people on the road driving while black?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, walking while Latino or whatever. Okay. I mean, it's going to be horrific because, you know, white-skinned, really white-skinned folks are not going to get stopped and asked for any kind of documentation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, remember Michael Reinhold, the guy who, he was the sort of Antifa guy that got in a scrap with a Trump dude and shot him. And then later Trump just sent a straight up hit squad to murk that dude. They just rolled up and shot him, just like gangland execution style, you know, like Al Capone would have done. And then Trump boasted about it later. The fact that he had just been wasted, with no due process, no trial, no nothing, just up and shot full of holes out of nowhere.
And that's to me why the speech is so reactionary, in the sense that he likes to use invasion language. He used the word, we're not going to be conquered. And part of his executive order, deluge, included, you know, sending troops to the border and identifying cartels as terrorist groups and talking about foreign gangs in the country. So clearly, like, the language of safety, security, and war here and abroad, but, you know, in the same time, he's saying, I'm the peacemaker and we're going to end wars. He's talking about the militarization of our borders and the need to go after the real criminals and the people that are invading our country, who live among us in the millions, apparently.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, that's a good example of why I said you're an applied philosopher. You're hearing things at a level that I have not yet come to hear in this speech, because I was so blown away by the image, because of the historical imagery and what it conjured up in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, this maybe is a good part to bring up, you know, the broader context with Mexico. You know, so he says, you know, quote, all illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the place from which they came. Criminal aliens, you know, people who broke civil law, unauthorized immigrants. Will reinstate my remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release, blah, blah, blah. So, but then he goes on to say, and I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Yeah. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organization. And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which we mentioned, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. And that suggests, like, we're going to declare war on Mexico, like tacitly, if not, literally. We're going to invade Mexico. What do you do with foreign terrorist organizations? Well, as Obama showed us, you go drone bomb them. You do those special forces assassination hits, like how we got Obama. And generally, just go and fight them like we fought ISIS or Al Qaeda or whatever. And this would be, sending the military into another sovereign state without their permission. And Mexico's already made it very clear that is not okay. And yeah, this is our peacemaker in chief. He's going to start a war with these cartels.
Well, he did drop the term manifest destiny into his speech.
Yeah.
With reference to Mars. But he might well have, him obviously had it in mind at the same time, Greenland. For all I know, he had Baja California in mind. I mean,
he mentions the frontier, and we've had Greg Grandin on the podcast before to talk about his book that's relevant there and how manifest destiny leads to Trump and the wall and all that. But it's also frustrating because these historical examples also combine with certain things that, like, in another context with a different president, it would be great to hear in terms of like emphasizing ambition. And I mean, he of course privatizes. Going to Mars is going to be with Musk and with private capital, not JFK and going to the moon with NASA, right? So there's that huge difference there. But saying things like, in America, the impossible is what we do best. The Democrats would never say that. When's the last time, right? Like, not any time recently anyway. Like, it would be, it's so frustrating that the most reactionary party that we have with the most reactionary president is the one that's being bold, and along with the craziness and the racism and misogyny and everything else. But he's saying, all these large things. We're going to do all these great things. We're going to win. We're going to be ambitious. And so, for ignorant people that really support him, when he talks, I think, about all these different news items that they might hear about but not really know about, he's giving them a kind of permission to say he's got it covered. You hear about fires? Yeah, I'll tell you what that's about. You hearing about all these different things? We've got that. And also, we're going to do all these big things for you, right? So it's just perfect propaganda, really.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say this, and I don't want people to hear me saying that I want to do this or agree with him. But when you just said we haven't heard the Democrats talk about doing the impossible. Probably the last time would have been, well, you're probably right. It was probably Kennedy Johnson years. Okay.
Yeah.
Kennedy Johnson years. And possibly if Bernie had been elected, it might well have been the case, but he didn't get elected president. So, but the thing is, when he said that we're going to, first of all, did he say China controlled the Panama Canal?
Yeah, he did.
I mean,
I want to bring that up in a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, but let me remind people what I just said. I am not endorsing military action to take Greenland. Okay. But since he has no concern about, he despises NATO. Okay. For a host of reasons, I'm sure. I would assume that as Denmark is the sovereign power over Greenland, that we're covered by way of NATO for defense against China, which is what is going to be used as the meaning of why we should take Greenland, defense against China, because things are going on in the polar region.
Yeah.
Okay. But it is the case, and I'm going to say this, and I say this with quotes around it. It was brilliant of him to do that. It sort of lays the groundwork for later stuff that he may well want to take up. Okay. And I don't know if that's Bannon urging him forward or what.
Yeah. I mean, that is kind of the wacky thing about the whole Greenland idea from a, traditional like national interest perspective. We already have a massive military base on Greenland,
right.
That's used, explicitly for the types of things you're mentioning. It's just coming completely out of nowhere. It's aside from that, I mean, it has minerals, but like there's no reason that would have, any benefit outside from like some small mining interest. And they probably could get concessions from the Danish government anyways. It's just like, I think it basically boils down to he sees a map of the Mercator projection that makes Greenland look 10 times bigger than it actually is. And he wants to paint that red, white, and blue, baby.
Well, don't forget Harvey's point about him being a real estate guy at heart. Yeah, that's a real estate, baby. It's a land grab. Plus, if you think of him, he's like, look at McDonald's success. They have that he's about branding. We might have a military base on Greenland, but we got to put the Trump USA brand there. They got to know it's ours. Everyone has to know, that's our land. And that's kind of his, let's expand. I mean, it fits well with the Manifest Destiny stuff. Let's just, have our global, power be more prominently branded. And if we need to actually acquire more land, let's do it more forcefully too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's going back to a 19th century model of, kind of power projection where you actually have to control the territory. Cause it's the same thing with Panama. He says, We've been treated very badly from this foolish gift that never should have been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. American ships are being severely overcharged. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back, which is all nonsense,
By the way, Panama, sorry, there's a little, I trained as a Latin Americanist, so I think we should all note that if he knew any history, he would have had an even stronger argument. He would have said, we created Panama.
Yeah.
Because Colombia did not want to go along with us. And so we ripped Panama off of Colombia and created Panama in order to then be able to pursue the canal. At least that's my recollection of my studies 40 years ago.
No, that's true. It used to be part of Colombia. And this notion, it's like China has made some investments in the Panama Canal Zone area, making investments everywhere. But the thing is operated with it's operated by the Panamanian government, by the Panama Canal Authority. And they charge, some nominal fee in terms of the value of the goods. I'm sure it's a pretty penny in dollars, but the whole thing operates, sort of on sufferance of the United States military and or broader sort of, geopolitical hegemony. It's totally understood by all parties involved that the Panama Canal is an important strategic interest of the United States, that it needs to keep open. We'll pay them some, piddling sum to send our ships through, but you run it. It's fine. Everybody wins. And now it's no, we're going to just cause this huge international embarrassment. And in fact, probably reduce our international, prestige and hegemonic power by using brute force to just take things by, with the military. Because then that just undermines the whole structure of alliances and security guarantees. If the United States isn't a trustworthy partner and you can make a deal saying, okay, you can take the canal back and we're just going to sort of live with that. And we're just going to renege on the deal like Darth Vader or something, pray I don't alter it any further. Then everyone else who, is part of this huge umbrella of alliances and trade deals and everything from Japan to South Korea to New Zealand to Australia, most of Europe, even China to a lesser extent, Taiwan, they're all going to be oh shit, the whole, tentpole thing, the system, the way that the whole political arrangement, however just or unjust it may be, the thing that sort of everyone was assuming that was stable is now unstable. And that's going to mean that, everyone's going to be, just looking to get away from the United States, and, reduce, their dependence on us. And they'd be fools not to, Poland, get nukes, do it now, and Taiwan and Japan.
If it goes so far as to involve a military takeover of the Panama Canal by the United States, that is the license for China to invade Taiwan.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which will then kick into gear a whole host of.
Yeah. You're back to the late 19th, early 20th century of great power wars. We're kind of there to a limited extent already with Russia and Ukraine, but it's oh boy,
right. And in this persistent thermonuclear age.
Yeah. A hypocritical liberal order, with lots of imperialism and exploitation. There's worse things than that. And it's a dog eat dog 19th century imperialism where they don't even feel ashamed to just conquer a country and steal everyone and enslave people and butcher them, whatever they want.
I used to tell my students, you can say what you want about neocolonialism, but it isn't colonialism.
That's right. Yeah.
So I wanted to just briefly touch on McKinley, because this is like the one area where Trump actually mentions some historical stuff. He says, quote, President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal, which is, why he's taking it back away. And then he says earlier than that, this is why we're going to change the name of Denali, the mountain in Alaska, back to Mount McKinley. And I thought, first of all, it's kind of ironic that he would be so respectful of McKinley, and while simultaneously calling himself the most persecuted president of all time. When McKinley was murdered, he died. He was shot to death.
Well, I felt, is the Denali produced by General Motors? Who produces the Denali, the vehicle? I was thinking,
I think so, yeah.
Whatever, those folks are going to have all those vehicles they're going to have to recall to
stamp a new badging on the G.
I make it, by the way, I don't mean to make light of any of this along the way.
No, gallows humor.
Okay. But these are the thoughts that cross my mind when he says those things, as I don't feel sorry for any big corporation, by the way, ever. So,
but corporations are people, Harvey. Come on.
That's true. Mitt Romney, didn't he run a campaign on that? Somehow he didn't get elected.
Yeah. But at any rate, I guess, he seems to, it's sort of a piece. His whole program is very McKinley-esque. And Harold Meyerson actually had an interesting little anecdote. He talked about why McKinley was named that. And it turns out to be that it was a robber baron. Harold says, quote, it was named after McKinley by a venture capitalist of that day, a prospector hoping to find and speculate in gold during the great Northwest gold rushes of the 1890s. He named the mountain for McKinley because, as the Republican presidential nominee in 1896, McKinley favored keeping U.S. currency on the gold standard, while his Democratic rival William Jennings Bryan favored minting silver coins, which he believed would bring down interest rates as wished by his political base, America's farmers. So it was like the Mark Andreessen of the 1890s trying to get some sort of a gold rush going by naming a mountain after the president.
Right.
Do we think that Trump understands how tariffs work at all? Someone must have told him, right? Because he brought up the External Revenue Service, right? We're going to bring in so much money from these other countries through the tariffs. And I can't tell if this is one of those things. And maybe, Harvey, when you looked at the original inaugural speech from 2017, maybe it's just one of those things he's going to bluster about but not do. But I mean, he's promised to lower prices. Inflation's going to go crazy. And this is not at all how tariffs work. What's your intuition?
Well, I've been asking myself the same thing. I'm not even sure. I mean, tariffs unto themselves will do exactly what you just said. It'll create inflation. I mean, I don't think there's any question, especially since so many consumer goods are secured abroad. But also keep in mind, he talked about pretty high tariff, a lower tariff on China, higher tariff on Canada and Mexico. And does he understand that that's our second trading partner? Does he understand the degree to which resources come from Canada to this nation?
He's talking about 25%, 30% tariffs, right?
Yeah. Those are the kinds of things that lead me to wonder. Look, do I expect working people to immediately understand the implications of that? No, they don't study this. And I mean, I don't even fully gather all of it. But what I do think is, how would major corporations that depend so much? I mean, I've never shopped in a Walmart, but what does Walmart have to say about that kind of thing? What are these or any of those, big box stores? And what do they say about this? I mean, I can't believe they're not organizing meetings right now to talk about how they can circumvent or how can they do that?
Yeah.
I mean, so no, he doesn't understand tariffs, but somebody thinks it sounds good because if you imagine tariffs, that means we'll industrialize behind the tariff wall. But
maybe the tariffs will be just like the Green New Deal apparently happened under Biden. Maybe the tariffs will quote unquote happen without happening or something.
I don't know if I said it earlier. I know I was thinking it earlier. I can't believe I'm going to say something in favor of the Biden administration again, but there was far more interest in cultivating industrial and manufacturing activity in this country under the Biden administration than we had seen in a very long time. And there are ways that it should have been done or could have been done, but at least it was a serious intent to cultivate industrial and manufacturing activity. And the reason I say that is if you make all of the incentives in favor of capital and don't build into it other kinds of incentives for working people, it's not going to be the way to pursue it. But that's not the point. The point is that when working people hear tariffs, they may imagine this is going to cultivate industry in this country. Not to mention, it takes a while to build a factory. It takes a while to build industrial plant.
Yeah, I mean, this is again another way in which Trump is really pulling the, rug out from under great big sections of the business class because of the anti-China pivot that started arguably under Obama, but gathered steam under Trump, and then it was sort of solidified under Biden as a kind of bipartisan consensus. Mexico has sort of been, realigned to become the new China as far as relations to the United States economy, as well as a bunch of stuff being invested domestically. As you said, Harvey, manufacturing investment on an inflation adjusted basis is like more than doubled, I think, since Biden took office. Biggest manufacturing boom since like the 1970s. And a lot of it most of it hasn't come online yet. It's all the battery factories and green tech and EV stuff we were mentioning before. But yeah, all these companies, in addition to that, they've been pivoting to Mexico, as a sort of like more supposedly geopolitically, friendly country that's not doing the sorts of like what China's doing right now. It's just a very toxic thing to do. It's their domestic economy is messed up. And so they're just dumping all this surplus production, abroad. And it's screwing up, Europe pretty badly, anywhere that has any sort of industrial base. Yeah. And they're not going to, the world can't just gulp down these sizes of surpluses forever. But yeah, instead, Trump's going to just implement, if he actually does this, that's the promise, 25%, I believe, tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Like that would cause untold havoc, potentially like great big chunks of these huge and delicate and highly elaborate supply chains would have to be completely reconstructed, maybe from scratch. I mean, we saw how badly the pandemic messed everything up. This is something where like you could really, even if you just left them in for a few days and then turned them back off again, like that could just cause untold chaos. And, it's a good question how he is so fixated on this. It reminds me of the story that was reported during his first term as to why Trump kept saying build the wall, and his advisors settled on build the wall as something that he could remember. It's just like a slogan. And then he just got fixated on it and he couldn't stop. And he was just wanting to build the wall, even though when you think about it for 5 seconds, it doesn't make any sense. The damn border is like 2,500 miles long. It would cost like $1 trillion. And then you'd have to patrol the entire thing because otherwise you could just get a ladder that was 1 foot higher than the wall. I mean, the whole idea is completely nuts. And
yeah, you don't hear about the wall much anymore, do you?
No. And I think that tariffs, he maybe read a book, one of those, was that David McCulloch books that he does all those president biographies.
Yeah. It was a McCulloch. Yeah. Something like that. Right.
One of those guys. But, this idea, we're going to do tariffs and industry, and that's how we fund the government. We don't need the income tax, and not looking at the magnitudes. Back in the 1890s, the federal government was like 5% of GDP. I mean, we basically didn't have a federal government in the way we understand it now. There was no Medicare, no Social Security, no Medicaid. The military was like 95% smaller than it is now. None of this, elaborate, financial regulation and stuff. And it's just like, you can't run a modern state with 19th century revenue system. It's just not practical. And yet you can't, Trump
I
doesn't
think
know.
it's just part of his America First branding language, right? Like he wants to speak to people as the kind of white male heteronormative working class president, right? And that's why he also does as much as he speaks about freedom, the kind of fascistic, the government's gonna mandate that there are two genders, right? And so so much for the government staying out of our private lives, but which
sorry, can I just sidebar you on that one? That's the kind of thing that one could perhaps have imagined laughing in response to, but it wasn't funny.
No. Not only that, there's an executive order that's going to affect U.S. passport holders who are trans, who can only now, I think, travel under their dead name. Like there's all these implications, and might actually relate to visas and people. There are people that are saying, well, I guess I can't come to the States anymore, at least until Trump's out of power, because my paperwork isn't what's now required, and maybe there'll be more of a hassle. He's just about hassling the kind of people that he can make other, whether immigrant, trans, non-binary, what have you, right? And it's
but what's that? There's that. I always remember seeing it on one of my dorm buddies' walls. What was that famous? Those lines. They came for the. I bet you know it by heart.
The communists. That's what. Yeah.
And then they came for it was at first the commies or the Jews, and then they and it went down, and then they came for me,
and no one was left, right?
Yeah,
that's right. That's how they
do it. Another thing Trump did in that vein was repeal President Johnson's 1965 executive order banning discrimination. As part of the desegregation effort after the Civil Rights Act passed.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and I think this
I didn't. That went by me somehow.
Yeah,
so many executive orders.
I think it just happened this morning.
I haven't seen this morning's list yet.
Yeah, it's I think it shows you what the whole anti-DEI movement, where it was always going to cash out, because they want to ban affirmative action because it's unfair. But then the second step will be to ban hiring Black people and women and other minorities in favor of whites only as de jure or some sort of de facto bias. In favor of, the rich fail son, Jared Kushner, C- students who will get cushy jobs in government because no Black people allowed. They're going for Jim Crow. I think that's a fair, they may not get there, but.
So that means that empowers. Oh my God. Sorry.
I don't know the implications necessarily. I don't know how that executive order necessarily worked, but I think it's a signal. Open season on Black people in government. Get rid of them. Don't hire them, where the boys are back in town.
Sign enough of the executive orders. Look, I know you guys at the American Prospect are doing your best to try to come to grips with these. I don't know who's got the master list of these things and how we go about reversing them. But geez, I hope there's some institution that is doing just that. Some law school maybe should have that as a major endeavor.
But I think we're at about an hour. We didn't get to half of what I wanted to talk about. Maybe I have to head out soon.
Okay, well, let me just add one more thing.
Sure.
On a more trivial level, but part of the outrageousness of these last several months. Together, we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. And then the unstated thing there, which has been generally a part of the story because he's about to appoint him the head of what is it, the FDA? Who's
HHS.
Bobby Kennedy Jr.?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lesser son of greater fathers.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. But here's Bobby for you.
Yeah. Bobby, he attempted to revoke authorization of the COVID vaccine 6 months after it was approved. He's been consistently anti-vax, was personally implicated in a measles outbreak in Samoa that killed 83 people, mostly children. We're making America polio-ridden again. We're bringing back iron lungs, baby. We're bringing them back very strongly.
Did you see in the speech, he also had a special thing for people in the armed forces who refused the required COVID vaccine?
Yeah.
Right. he's gonna like give them back pay and which is just so. But he's so bizarre. The vaccine was released under Trump. Like this is just so weird. He's so weird.
I don't think there are that many of those soldiers who did that, but it really speaks to the level of entitlement among the MAGA crowd that, you know, I was in the Peace Corps, and when you join the Peace Corps, they, you know, basically say, you know, take your pants down and here's a double handful of shots, just right in both cheeks. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but it was like every day for 2 weeks, new shot, new shot, new shot. There was no question. You're working for the government. You signed up for this. And like, I'm in the Peace Corps. These are in the military. The people who signed up to be killed if necessary. And you can't get a shot because you're scared of the little needle? Like, shut the fuck up, dude.
I think half of Trump's speech is just like, I got my different, you know, fanatics that I have to appease with various little items that will speak directly to their obsession. And I think strangely, because he's such a narcissist and he's like, he loves winning or being liked. And so he thinks that, you know, Hispanic, Latino, and African Americans support him now. I think that's why he has this throwaway line about fulfilling MLK's dream. Like, he's like, I got to throw something to that crowd now, too.
Yeah.
Right.
He was a celebrity.
He covered his bases with a Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, and Black pastor. I mean, covered his bases, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a closing comment, I meant to bring this up earlier. Maybe we can talk about it. I'll have you on again, Harvey. But Trump did a crypto, basically it seems like a rug pull already. He came out with his own meme coin, which is just a scam. That's the only possible purpose for all crypto, honestly. But a meme coin, the Hawk Tua girl just did one of these, stole like $2 million.
Well, wait, did I not see the Black pastor?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. The pastor, minutes after delivering his benediction or whatever, was on, Instagram Live or something, just saying, "Buy my coin." It's like, you need to think about your soul, buddy. Because
on Dr. King's day, right?
I want to know if he did that. Did he do that from one of the holes in Congress? Is he subject to arrest for hawking his coin?
Yeah, committing securities fraud in a federal government building. If it's not against the law, it damn well should be.
It doesn't get more perverse and absurd as all that.
I'm glad we can finish with a laugh. But seriously speaking, to everyone listening, this is really dangerous stuff we're witnessing. Really dangerous. And keep in mind, this is only the third day of 4 years.
Christ.
And God, it felt, even now, do you have any confidence the Democrats will get it together enough so that in 2026 we can take back the House at least?
I don't.
Hope is a practice, my friend. We have to pressure, as you say, we have to pressure those positioned to do anything for us on our behalf. So
yeah, and I think
that's hope for a few leaders that will ask us to pressure them, right, Harvey?
Yeah,
that's something as a closing comment, I think that we'll be looking for is someone who could stand up to Trump and just say no. I think J.B. Pritzker's been doing a good job. AOC's been doing a good job. And, that I think there's a desperation for that kind of leadership, someone to lay out an alternative vision to all these scammers and violent criminals who are now running the
And as much
show.
as we call out the scammers, the criminals and the MAGA crowd, we have to call out the Democrats that collude and compromise and vote for the immigration bills and all the other nonsense that they're so eager to work with Trump on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Well, listen, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Fight the good fight. Thanks, Harvey.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Solidarity.
You bet. I look forward to the next occasion.
We will see everyone in the next episode.